So a tree really isn't just this thing that grows up out of the ground. A tree is as much the ground and the rain and the sky as it is anything else. And yet we think there's this thing that exists independent of all of that called a tree. You see? But of course, that can never be true, can it? Because, as I said, you cannot have a tree without the sky overhead. You cannot have a tree without ground, and you cannot have a tree without water. So in a very real sense, the tree is all of that. A tree is all of the stuff that we don't define tree by. If you go in a dictionary and you look up what a tree is, what you'll find is an abstract definition of something that cannot possibly exist. I'm not denying that, when you go outside and you bump into something that has a trunk in it and leaves and all these, I'm not denying, of course, that that exists, whatever that is. That would be ridiculous. Things that when you were a kid, you climbed up in them and, when you got to be an adult, you got anxious when other people climbed up in them. This is the most basic level of our experience, isn't it? And so we live in these abstractions, and we don't even know we're living in an abstraction. This abstraction that says a tree is by definition different from the earth and the ground and the water and the sky. And of course it can't be, because if you take any of those elements away, there's no such thing as a tree. So it can exist independently of that. You can't define it independently of that. But if you look in the dictionary, you will find it defined independently of all the things that make up a tree. As if there's this thing that exists independent of all the things that make up a tree. Really, what makes up a tree is the whole universe. That's what makes up a tree. A single tree. A leaf, for God's sake. It takes a universe to make a leaf. It takes a whole cosmos to make a leaf. And of course, if we went around calling everything what it really is, well, then we wouldn't be able to really know what each other's talking about, would we? There's a cosmos out there, and you see it. And then there's a cosmos there, and it's raining cosmic stuff today, and it would all be kind of ridiculous. It wouldn't work out very well. So we make up these names so we all know what each other's referring to, right? Now, it doesn't, I was just going to say that's not that great of a consequence when we name something like a tree and think that it's separate from all these other things. Of course, but that's wrong, isn't there? There's a great consequence when we see a tree is separate from all those things, because then we go about degrading all these things and we wonder why the trees don't do so very well, you see. But when we take that same observation, and it can seem, initially it seems like it's a self-evident observation, but it can seem strange because we're so habituated into something different. We're so habituated into seeing the world in these little pieces, right? And things are the names we give them. And they are very distinct from each other, and they don't actually, so we think, they don't actually depend on each other. Not only do they not depend on each other, but they're not actually each other, so we think. That's what we've been raised with in a certain way. And of course, all this is this doesn't even take any kind of great scientific analysis. This all breaks down under the most simple observation. And strangely enough, it can seem so odd to our sensibilities. It can seem so almost unreasonable. Like the mind would go, well, yes, everything you say is true, but by God, there's a tree outside, you see? It's totally unreasonable to say there's not a tree outside. I mean, what is this, And of course, when you look at it, you can see the whole way that we define something as simple as a tree is somehow removed from everything else as a complete abstraction. This is what I mean when I call divine a conventional or agreed upon reality. We will wink to each other and nod to each other, and we'll pretend like there are these things that exist independently of each other.